We're going to jump back in. We're on page 7 of the booklet. During the break, a question was asked. One person had a situation where they were asked to go visit somebody they didn't know. It was the friend of, they knew they had a friend. It was their friend. So they went there for their friend to visit someone they didn't know. And when they got there, the friend wanted this person healed so desperately, they announced in front of the person that, okay, you're going to pray for this person, and this person's going to get healed, and we're not leaving until this person's out of the bed. And the person was in their 80s, a lady dying of cancer, and she was just ready to go. And it was a fairly traumatic experience because, okay, here my friends believing that I'm going to do this, and they've kind of got their expectations on this now, and they've just announced it. What do you do with that? Right off the cuff, the first thing I'd have done is I'd have turned to the person and said, so how are you doing? I understand that so-and-so here really loves you and really does not want to see you leave this earth. But where are you at? What can you believe for? What do you want me to pray? And I'd have taken the attention off of them and went to the person. And the friend you might have to deal with after you leave the room and say, you know what? You just promised them the moon. Just what we were talking about. You just promised them the moon. What if we pray and they die? Or they just linger. That'd be worse yet. They just linger for 2-3 months sick. And you promised them when I prayed God would heal them. Now they may look at me like I failed them. Then again, they may look at God and say, he failed me. And it could actually affect their attitude towards God, which we don't need before they die. We need them to have a good attitude. So, yeah, you're going to hit spots like that. And it's remember, it's not about us. It's about the person, always. Because you can walk into situations where the family's saying, Pastor's here. Now you're going to feel better. Well, I'm believing for that. But what I believe for doesn't always happen. Are they going to link their faith with me? Where are they at? So sometimes you have to kind of graciously just dismiss other people's expectations and focus on the person you're there to minister to. Okay, page 7. This is a different individual who wrote about effective hospital visitation. Now this person is a full gospel person, believes in healing, that whole thing. So they approach it from a little different angle. They give some biblical basis there, which is really good. The second paragraph there, we'll start with the second line in that second paragraph. Within the Pentecostal church, the importance of meeting the physical needs of the sick is evident by the belief in and the practice of divine healing. See, that other person didn't mention that at all. And that's okay, but this is more the page we're on. We earnestly believe that deliverance from sickness is provided for in the atonement and is a privilege of all believers. So as a result, we're going in praying and believing for healing. It's just part of it. So he talks about compassion and pastoral care. The foundation of pastoral care is compassion. The foundation of hospital and shut-in visitation is compassion. It's not wielding power. It's not wielding our spiritual gifts and impressing somebody in the room, especially if a family member's there or friends there. This if we're very immature, this thing may come up. Well, I'm going to show them the power of God by what's going to happen through me right here, and we jump into something goofy and doesn't turn out well. Galatians 5:6 says, faith works by love. Love this person. Have compassion. Show them care. And faith can work in that and minister to them. Number 1, down there at the bottom, the pastor visits become because of compassion for the one who is sick or suffering to alleviate the anxiety, fear, and despair. Now he's hitting some things here. This writer's hitting some stuff I was talking about the other writer didn't hit. There's many times anxiety, fear, despair that accompanies sickness. We endeavor to replace those emotions with hope, courage, peace, and the ability to cope. See, now we got faith talking here. We're in there to minister. We're in there to do something. If you go to number 2 on page 8, about halfway through, it's the third line. With respect to empathy, unless the caregiver is able to view the other person's situation as if he or she were that person, the caregiver would not be able to provide effective and meaningful pastoral care. In other words, put yourself in their spot. What would you feel like? That is huge in ministry, in showing love and compassion. If we're kind of coming from our perspective without thinking what they might be feeling like or what they might be going through, it's very difficult to show compassion and love in that. But if I was laying flat on my back in traction because of a car accident, my back's broken, my leg's broken, what would I feel like and what would I need from my pastor right there? That will really help you connect and be able to minister. Middle of page 8, the pastor and the healthcare team. That is okay, but he's talking more from a chaplain's perspective there. Most of the things he says there for you and I, the nurses station, the people who are giving the care, the doctors and so forth, they don't have time to talk to us. They don't want to be, because he's talking about, well, get information from them and so forth. If you're in an emergency room situation and the doctor comes out and you're standing there with the family, well, you might want to engage with them and ask, because the family's going to be in shock, and they're not going to know what to ask. And the doctor will say some things, and the Holy Spirit will say, well, ask this or ask that, so that you're helping them. Then you can engage with the doctor. But I don't go looking for the doctor every time I go visit somebody in the hospital. Where's your doctor? I want to talk to your doctor. I mean, the doctor would look at me and say, what? I don't have time to chit-chat with every person who's coming in to visit. So that if you're a chaplain and you work this hospital, everything he says right there makes perfect sense. The bottom, emotional and spiritual preparation. This is good. So we're going to read through this. A fourth area is needed in making meaningful hospital visits is the minister's emotional and spiritual preparation. Number 3, included in knowing yourself is the knowledge of your role as a minister, your emotions, your mortality, your faith. Where are you at? For example, in respecting a patient's point of view, it is important that we avoid clinging to the status given to us by patients, but show our willingness to come alongside the patient and have a relationship that is to and for the person. In other words, whatever they've given to us, don't just settle for that. Try to build it into more. As pastoral caregivers, we should anticipate that some of our visits with patients and relatives will be exhausting and draining, and it is. There's times it is. It's high pressure. It is essential, therefore, that we know our emotional limits and avoid allowing our irrational emotions to gain control. What can you handle? What can't you handle? Know that going in. In situations involving death and dying, it is vital that we have resolved our own issues concerning death and grief and are able to cope with these issues in a manner that will help the other person. If we're afraid of dying, it's going to be hard to help someone who's laying there dying and they're afraid of dying. It's kind of what he's saying. If we're emotionally distraught by what we're seeing, how are you going to minister peace and hope to this person? I mean, if you walk in the room and go, oh my goodness, so you really do have to have a grip on yourself. I've never had to do it, but I know of one minister who said, I walked into a room, it was too much for me. What I was seeing was too much for me. He said, excuse me for a second, I remember I have to go out and take care of something. He wasn't lying. He saw that. He remembered, I better get ready for this before I come back in. So he went out and got into a bathroom and started praying. God, I'm here to minister to them, and I can't be struggling in their presence. And I'm going back in there by faith, believing you're going to give me what I need. So here we go. And then he went back in. He said, I did fine. He said, but had I stayed in there, he said the shocked look on my face would have probably set them back because they'd have seen it. So we have to know where we're at. It is critical that we are grounded in our faith so we can respond to questions about healing, suffering, forgiveness that are raised by patients and relatives. And see, that comes from what I said before. There's going to be times they're going to ask questions you're not going to have good answers. But I guarantee you, the next time you go in and get that question, you'll have the answer. It comes by growth. It's critical we grow in that area. Although the hospital room is not a place for theological arguments, there is a need for pastors or for caregivers to respond to these issues based on the knowledge of the Bible, God, and their church's doctrine. Okay, middle of page 9, do's. Call the hospital prior to your visit. That's really good. Call the hospital and or many times you don't have to call the hospital. You can call the person or the person's spouse or whoever. Call ahead. Make sure it's okay for you to come. Make sure you're telling them kind of the timing you're planning to come, and it works because, again, it's not about us. It's about them. And you just really want to make it the most about them as possible. Plus, you don't want to drive down there for an empty run. I've done that. And I didn't call ahead, and someone from the church called me and said, they're in the hospital, and they're in this room, and if you get a chance, go visit them. So I jumped in the car that afternoon, and I ran down there, and they were no longer in that hospital. They had been transferred, and it's like, oops. Should have called ahead. Number 4, stop at the nursing station. That, again, is kind of a repeat. Got to find the procedures need to be followed if there are any. Introduce yourself to the patient. Number 5, that's if you don't know them. Sit if possible. That's, again, so you are not dominating over them. You're thinking of communicating with them at their level. Maintain eye contact with the patient. Be cheerful and make pleasant conversation. Ask open-ended questions, things that they can respond to easily, and let them determine what they want to talk about or what they don't want to talk about by your question. Display concern for the patient's illness and respect for his or her feelings. Watch for doors that lead to the feeling level of Watch for doors that lead to the feeling level of communication and be alert for negative feelings. In other words, read their body language. Read the atmosphere, because you might inadvertently bring something up that they don't want to talk about. And you've got to catch that and just back away or jump away from it. Don't expect them to lead the conversation. You're visiting them. They didn't come to visit you. So you have to be alert. Number 6, shape the tone and substance of your conversation from cues, verbal and nonverbal. Listen, notice, a gentle touch, ask permission to touch, share scriptures. Just some good, very practical advice. Page 10, the don'ts. Don't be insulted by the patient's words and attitude or register shock at the patient's appearance. Because some people look good going in because it's not that drastic, and other people have tubes coming out everywhere, and they still have blood matted in their hair, and the whole side of their face is swollen out. You can't hardly recognize them, and don't be shocked by that. You've got to be ready going in, because if the last thing, and I've never heard a minister do this, but I've heard a friend do it. They walk in and they say, "Oh my goodness, you look bad." It's like, we came with good news. I look like I'm dying. It's they haven't seen themselves, especially if they were in an accident or something and they're still not all put together, and you happen to meet them in intensive care or even in the emergency room. They're going to look rough. Boy, whatever you think, don't say it in that realm. It's not about that. And don't be insulted by they might be in shock, they might be frustrated, they might say some things that can be really rude or insulting. I remember walking into one emergency room situation, and they said, "What are you doing here?" Just in that tone of voice. "What are you doing here?" And it's like, "Well, I can leave if you want me to," kind of thing. And that's what I said. I said, "Well, I can leave if you want me. I'll respect your privacy, but so-and-so called and said you were in an accident, so I came to see how you're doing." I said, "Oh, never mind. Yes, I want you here. But don't, if someone says that, what they're When they communicate to you, what are you doing here? They're surprised. They might be embarrassed because you don't know what's going through their head. They may just plain want their privacy. And if that person would have said, can you come back when I get into the normal room? Right now, I just need to be alone. I'd have said, absolutely. I'll stay in touch. I'll be back tomorrow or whenever. Do not be insulted or offended. This is not about us. It's about them and what we can do the most to help them. Don't offer false optimism. Again, don't promise the moon, and don't criticize the doctor or the hospital. Don't touch equipment and start adjusting things for them. I mean, this is just common sense stuff, but you'd be surprised what people will do. Don't tell the patient unpleasant news. Well, I feel bad for you because once you get out of the hospital, you're going to find out your house burned down. You know, kind of. I ran over your dog coming over here. Don't give them bad news. Let them find it out a different way. Don't you be the caregiver of bad news. You're with the gospel. That's good news. Don't whisper when talking to relatives or the medical staff, a registered nurse, the doctor. Don't pull them to the side because that is insulting to the patient. Plus, they're wondering what is really going on that they're not wanting to tell me. It's just wrong. Don't break hospital rules and violate confidentiality issues, especially when it comes to medical things, the HIPAA law stuff. Don't awaken a sleeping patient unless the nurse approves. And I've had that happen. Drove all the way. I used to live an hour and a half from one hospital. Drove all the way there, and they're sleeping. So I sat in the chair, quietly. You know how the best example of this is, you know how junior high or teenagers are if they want mom's attention and they can't get it? Mom's sleeping or mom's on the phone or whatever. You know, something to, I don't know how many times I've had to tell children, she's sleeping. Let her sleep. Oh, no, I need to say something. Well, yeah, it's obvious. You're trying to wake her up without saying, Mom, wake up. You know, don't wake them. Don't sit there and turn the TV on and turn it up, hoping they wake up kind of thing. Sit there quietly. Sat there 15, 20 minutes. They were just out like a log. So I wrote something, found something. Usually I try to take some paper or something with. There's usually stuff in the room, too. Or you can go to the nurse's station and say, they're sleeping, I just want to leave them a note. And they'll give you paper, they'll give you whatever you need. And I wrote a note and left my card, and I left. Never got to talk to him, drove an hour and a half home. Spent 3 hours on the road, never got to talk to him. That happens. It's not about me. It's about them. And if that's what's happening, that's what's happening. Don't help patients get out of bed or give food or drink without the nurse's approval. I've seen that. Don't assume a comatose patient cannot hear you. Many times they can hear you. Use that for your advantage. Speak to them. Speak to their spirit. Speak to their mind. They might be laying there and the doctor says, well, we've got them in a coma, especially brain injuries. They'll induce a coma and put them into a coma. And many times these people who come out of those comas heard what's going on and who was there. Understand that and speak life. Speak God to them. And then on the bottom of page 10, he just summarizes his do's and don'ts in nice, clean lists. It's very good. Very practical stuff. It's good. Any questions there? Okay, jump over to page 12. The first part there, this guy copied from the previous guy, or the previous guy copied from him. One or the other. That first paragraph is the same. Suggestions, many of these are the same. Pray before you arrive, number one. Have a plan. You may not use your plan, but have a plan. Understand HIPAA, the health stuff. Don't obstruct flow. As visitors, we are the wallflowers. If a nurse comes in, if a doctor comes in, they should not have to ask us to move. We should have volunteered that. Do you want me to move? Do you want me to leave the room? What do you need of me? Volunteer that when they come in. Don't. And again, I've watched it, not with ministers, but I've watched it with people who were there visiting, and they're holding their hand and they're stroking their hand, and the doctor's standing there with a stethoscope. He wants to, and they're busy comforting the person, looking at the doctor and smiling. And I'm going, you're not reading that man's body language at all. This is all about you right now and what you're doing with your friend. He's standing there. I'm the doctor. I have a schedule. I want to see my patient. And they didn't get it. They just, she's doing so well. And finally he said, could you excuse me so I can check her heart and pulse? And, yeah. He should have never had to ask that. We're the wallflowers. Pay attention. Read people's body language. Don't obstruct the flow. If nurses come in with food, get out of the way. Let them set up the trays. Let them do whatever. And be willing to leave the room. Keep it short. This person says 10 minutes or so. Of course, take your cues from the patient there. Some people want a real short visit. Others want a little longer. Find ways, they say, have a plan. Number 2, have it planned in your mind. How am I going to find out how long this person wants me to stay? What kind of questions will I ask that are not going to put them in a bad spot, but give them the opportunity to express themselves? Have a plan on some of these things before you go in. And some of those questions is very important. Number 6, be sensitive but not timid. Don't go in there like a bull in a china closet. Here we are, we're going to save the day. Don't do that. But at the same token, don't be so timid you can't step up and minister. But be sensitive. Don't avoid the pressing conversations about surgeries or a serious diagnosis. Also assess the depth of the conversation. If they want to go deep with the conversation, follow them. If they don't press it. So you had surgery. How'd that go okay? You want to talk about anything? It went all right. Bingo, they're done. They don't want to talk about it. Don't follow that up with, well, what did the doctor say? Are you going to be okay? I mean, did they get it? And it's like, if they wanted you to know some of that, they wouldn't have said what they just said. They don't want to talk about it, at least right at that moment. So change the subject, go off something different, and then you can kind of wheel around and come back in and say, well, what can we agree on? Is there anything the doctor said or anything that happened we can agree on? Well, you just open the door again for them to discuss their surgery or what the doctor said. 10 minutes later, they may just go there. Oh, the doctor said I only have 6 months to live, and I don't know what I'm going to tell my family, and my husband doesn't even know yet. Now, what am I going to say? Bingo, they just opened the door. Now you can go deep. But if you'd have pressed deep to begin with when they didn't want to go there, you'd have insulted them and maybe just turned them off. So you have to follow them. Always remember, it's about them, not us. Lend a healing touch. Always ask first, though. Is it okay if I lay my hand on your shoulder? Is it okay if I hold your hand? Is it okay? If they want you to do it, they'll say it's fine. And physical touch is very important. Don't rush out the door, but be sensitive when you should stay longer. Sometimes what you say is, he's got it bold there, what you say isn't really important. Your presence matters more than anything. The fact you just showed up. Again, he says don't give false hope, or in other words, don't promise them the moon. If the family's there, don't ignore them. Number 9, talk to them. Sometimes you can minister more to the family than you can to the person in the bed. How are you guys doing with this? This must have been a shock. Man, if I was in your position and to find out this, wow, are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? And you just handed them the ball. Now, if they want to open the door and really talk about this, they will. If they just go, we're okay, we'll get through this, they don't want to talk about it. Then it's like, well, just if you ever do want to chat about it or you got questions or whatever, just let me know, because it's got to be tough. And get off the subject and move on. Listen for their response. Do not sit on the bed. Do not get in the bed with them. I didn't see this, but I had a minister tell me. He got in the bed so he could pray healing over them. I just felt like if I could get my arms around them, God would heal them. And if a doctor or nurse would have come in and caught you, you'd have been in so much trouble. It's common sense stuff, but you'd be amazed how when the emotions get going and the heat of the moment and crazy thoughts come to your mind, just back up. Don't sit on the bed. Don't get in the bed. Get off the oxygen hose. Don't stand on that either. Kind of just pay attention to what's going on. Meal times happen. Cut your visit short. Ask to come back in 15 minutes. Some people say, no, it's fine. Just stay here. I'll eat. And if it doesn't bother you, it's okay. We can visit while I'm eating. That's typical what happens when I ask. You want me to leave? No, it's fine. If it doesn't bother you, it doesn't bother me. You can stay while I'm eating. That's typical. But always be conscious of them. Bedpan issues, leave the room. If they're going to get them out of bed and take them to the restroom, because most rooms have a restroom right in the room, leave the room. Say, I tell you what, it's going to be better for everybody to do their job. I'll come back in 10 minutes, 5 minutes. And then just look at the nurse and say, tell you what, I'll knock on the door. If it's not good, just say, wait a moment, and I'll just step out. Just leave the room. It's just the best. If you're sick, don't go. Number 13. Number 14, avoid being a medical know-it-all, and don't put down their doctor. Oh, what's wrong with that idiot? He told you what? And they're in bed going, he's the one caring for me. And now I've lost all confidence in him. Don't do that. It's not our job. If the door is closed, depending upon, again, the situation, you can go to the nurse's station and ask, should I go in? Usually I'll knock, and typically you'll get the response, come in. If I hear nothing, I'll go to the nurse's station, and I'll ask, is it okay if I go in there? They might be sleeping. I knocked, I didn't hear anything. Oh, yeah, that's fine. Or, no, I tell you what, this is a bad time. Can you come back in a half an hour? Well, then you go someplace, you do something to fill a half an hour. Don't try to manipulate your way in. Well, I'm in a real hurry, and I drove an hour to get here, and I've got to get this visit in. Is there any way I could go in right now? The nurse just asked you to wait. Wait. Don't leave a bad taste in these people's mouths, because they talk amongst each other, and sometimes if you aggravate them enough, they'll talk to the family. And they'll say, I don't know who the pastor was, but my recommendation is don't let him come back here because he was really pushy. And the family will just shut you out. So remember, it's not about us. It's about them. Watch for cues, read their body language. Number 17, call the hospital prior. So these are all retakes again. Number 18, be wise what you take into the room. Don't offer to bring hamburger, pizza, candy. I've had people say, oh, Pastor, you coming? Can you pick up a Big Mac for me? It's like, I'd like to, but you know what? I better not. Well, yeah, you'd probably get in trouble if you did. But if you want to sneak one in, I won't tell anybody, kind of thing. And it's like, don't go with that, because you might be giving them exactly what the doctor does not want them to have. So be wise about that. The don'ts were copied. Either the previous guy copied it from him or he copied it from the other guy, so it's all good. Don't have to read them. Page 14, the middle of the page. If the patient is near death, we're going to talk about that more in the next class on the 11th hour of ministry. But the only thing I'll say here, they give some suggestions. Boy, I better know this person really well before I'm going to ask them if they have a will. I did. It's like, I don't even know if I'd ask Kirby that. If Kirby was near, if he'd have been in a bad accident and he's in there and he's dying, hey, Kirby, you got a will? Did you put the church in it? It's just like, though to me, those are inappropriate questions. But That's this guy's where he's at. I would just try to be positive and encouraging, and then I'd say, is there anything about where you're at right now that you want to talk about? Kick the door open, let them decide if they want to talk about it. Page 15, last one. Again, much of this is the same. Call the hospital, choose a time that's good, pray, be prepared. Number 2 there, when you visit someone in the hospital, use the sanitizer, knock before entering the room. A lot of this is repeat. Number 3, never wake up a patient. Introduce yourself, that's obvious if you don't know them. A hospital visitation card if you don't know them. Or they're sleeping, it's good to have something you can write on or let them know there. It's okay if the patient is alone or asleep, simply leave the hospital. Page 16, when you visit someone in the hospital, always, if the patient is alert and awake, speak clearly and positively. Just some very basic things. This writer says on number 4 there, the bottom, never say, I know what you're going through. The only time you can say that is if you've gone through it. If you're dealing with someone who's going to deliver a baby and you're a mother, you can probably get away with saying, I know what you're going through. I remember being a first-time mother, and you probably have some awesome input to give. But if that lady's laying there and she's getting ready to give birth, and I walk in and say, I know what you're going through, honey, I don't have a clue what she's going through. That is a bad statement, and he's just kind of pointing that out. If you're going to make that statement, be sure you know what they're going through. Number 5, when you visit someone in the hospital, always talk in a volume that is respectful, especially if they're in a semi-private room and someone's across the curtain. Too often we forget curtains are not soundproof. And it can really get loud and people can carry on, and it's just a common sense thing. Don't outstay your welcome there. Number 6, he also recommends about 15 minutes, and look for cues if they want you longer. Otherwise, that's about what everybody says pay attention to, because people are sick and they don't always want to visit. Now, if they want you to stay longer, they'll let you know somehow. Number 7, when you visit someone in the hospital, pray with the patient before you leave the room. That, again, follow the Spirit on that, but I would presume if we want to minister to them, we're going to try to do that. Intensive care visits, number 8, be aware of the hours. Be aware if you don't carry a card, you may not get in intensive care. Be aware of the signage at the doors. If they're saying gowns, masks, gloves, quarantine, if it's quarantine, you really better talk to the nurse's station before you open that door. You may never get in there if it's quarantine. And in intensive care, again, there it's very important to keep the visits brief, because you've got a lot of activity. Nurses coming in, doctors coming in. You go in there, you be like Elijah. You don't have to pray all day long. You go in there and pray your prayer and get out, and God will respect your faith and your prayer. Number 9, intensive care visits, do not take flowers or gifts or candy or, I just knew you like this, so I thought I'd bring it. They're in intensive care. They're fighting for their life. They don't care. Kind of keep it in mind. It's about them. And no gifts, please. Their rule is don't bring any gifts of any kind. They give some things there that you can offer to do, but don't bring any gifts. Any questions? Shut-in visitation, page 18, much of the same stuff. There's not much different there. Shut-ins tend to be lonely. So there the 15-minute visit usually doesn't apply. Now, if they're having a bad day, it can. I mean, if they're struggling, they may not. The appointment was set up a day or two ahead of time. The setting the appointment, calling ahead, all that stuff still all applies. But if they're having a bad day, they may not want you there long, and the appointment's there, and they don't want to say, don't come, even though sometimes shut-ins will call and say, don't come, this is not a good day. Well, then don't go. And just set up a different time, and don't be offended, don't be insulted. But if you do go there and they're feeling okay, these people are shut-ins. They're likely lonely. They want some interaction, and they want some positive input from a living, breathing person. That's you. So in a shut-in situation, I usually plan for an hour. Now, again, you can go too long, because if they're in a shut-in situation, they're recovering from something. And they're probably on medication, and they're tired, or they'll get tired more quickly. So I'll usually plan for an hour. I think the longest I've ever been in a shut-in thing is 2 hours, right in that area. And the shortest has been 15 minutes or so. I mean, they wanted me to stay, but the pain on their face, the pain every time they tried to shift their body, they were trying so hard to be cordial because I came. And it's like, yeah, no, I'm not going to put you through this. You don't have to perform for me. Let's pray. Let's get to the point. I'll come back another day when you're feeling better. Now, if they absolutely say, please don't go, I need you because I'm in pain, well, that's different. But if they're just saying things like, well, but I know you came and I don't want you to feel like you came for nothing, or that's all immaterial. This isn't about me. This is about you. But if they're saying, I need a prayer meeting right now, can you stay and let's just pray? Well, no, I'm going to limit this to 10 minutes and I'm out. No, don't do that. They're asking for it. So in my mind, I usually look at shut-ins as like an hour. Again, some good suggestions there in the bottom of 18. Be a listener. Be comfortable with silence. If you're going to touch, make it gentle and always ask. Good eye contact. Don't be answering the phone. Don't get distracted by the TV, things like that. Avoid arguing, showing shock, number 9 there, or aggressively probing their boundaries, anything like that. Just love them. Avoid giving advice, number 12. Promising to do special things for them, offering them to solve problems. Could you go to town and get a gallon of milk for me? Well, if you feel in your spirit, you should. Cool. But don't feel obligated. There's got to be someone who's taking care of them. And if there's not, well, then now we have a whole different problem that we need to address. Because people who are shut-ins, they can make some odd requests. Can you come every day this week? I just need to have someone here. Well, if inside the Holy Spirit witnesses, yeah, you should do that. Well, then now you're going to find a way to do that. But if he doesn't witness that, don't be, because what will happen is they'll drain the life out of you, and you should be doing other things, and you're going to be consumed by this person long term, because once you've gone there every day for a week, there's another week coming. And there's going to be another request for more visits. And at some point, you're going to have to draw a boundary, and now they're going to feel that. Because they were actually making requests that were beyond what they should have made, but they're hurting, they're sick, they're lonely, So you have to use some wisdom there, especially with shut-ins. Hospitals, that's usually not the case where they ask you for outlandish things, other than food. I've had so many requests for food. Pastor, I love pizza. Can you get me one? It's like, I better. Can I ask the doctor? No, don't tell the doctor. He won't let you get me a pizza. Well, then maybe I shouldn't get you one, kind of thing. Or chocolate. Chocolate's number 2. Can you bring me a chocolate bar? I'm so hungry for chocolate. Make it a big one. That's about the only thing I get requests for in hospitals. But shut-ins will request can you take me to the doctor next week? They'll request all kinds of things. And some things we need to help them with or find someone who can. But if you get a really needy person, they'll literally drain you. And that's not what we're there for. We're there to minister life to them, agree with them in prayer, comfort them, encourage them, but not become their PCA or their healthcare provider. That's not our role. It's not our job. However, number 15, do believe in the value of what you're doing. It does make a difference. And then the end one, I won't. Let's go for a question. Got a question? Go ahead.
I have a question on some of the things you're saying here. When they are asking for requests, and to say no, I have a boundary, and you said the Holy Spirit tells you to do it, how can you discern when it's guilt or the Holy Spirit?
Okay. Good question. You practice that a few times, you'll figure it out. The question was, if they are requesting something of you and you're trying to find out, do I feel guilty now because they asked this and I don't want to say no? Do I feel like I'm not a good person if I don't say yes? How can I say no? Is it the Holy Spirit telling me to say no? How do you discern that? You'll get it after you've done it a few times. There's times I've agreed to some things and I'm doing them, and inside it's like, yeah, this wasn't God. I shouldn't have done this. And again, it's a trial and error. So don't just throw your hands up and go, well, I'll never do any kind of shut-in visitation again, period. I'm done with that. Don't do that, because you'll quit. Everybody learns trial and error. You learn by mistakes. You talk to the Lord about it and say, what should have I done different? How should I handle that different? Things like that. But yeah, you don't be surprised when you pull the wrong lever, because we're going to do it. It just happens. It's part of growing. Go ahead.
Second question is, you mentioned like a PCA person. Now, if we're visiting a shut-in, it would be somebody, the church has been contacted and we're sent out by the church, correct?
Typically, yes.
So if they need a PCA, is that something we would say, come back to the church and say, I think this person needs a PCA, what would we do?
Okay, the question is, if they're shut in and they need a PCA and they don't have one, either we've been asked to go visit them by a friend, or maybe they're a church member and the team said, Vicky called you and said, hey, can you go see so-and-so, they're needing a visit. And you get there and you find out they really need something. They need a PCA, they don't have one, or they really need something. How do we handle that? Number one, go back and talk to your leader. But typically speaking, something in the medical realm, they need to talk to their doctor or their insurance provider, their health care provider, because we can't provide a PCA anyway. We don't have the capability, we don't have the expertise, it's not what we're there for.
What if they don't know how to?
You can help them. If they don't know how, you can help them. What's the name of your doctor? Well, we can call them. Or do you have a nurse? Or did they leave a number you should call? Or because if they're a shut-in, they've been visiting some medical help of some kind. And you can help with that. But again, be careful, because they might call you 2 days later and say, I need my medication changed. Could you call the doctor for me? No, I can't. That's going to have to be between you and the doctor. And my primary job is to minister to you. I can't take on other roles. And it can be difficult sometimes to draw the boundaries, because, they're asking. You got to say no. But you do have to say no, especially when it comes to medical stuff. Because if, for instance, I'll just give you an example. If you call a nurse and say, I'm over here with so-and-so, and she shared her condition with me, and she's needing this, so I decided to call and talk to you about what's going on. And you start talking in. If you have a good nurse, the first thing they're going to add, they're going to stop you right there, and they're going to say, has she signed or he signed a written consent form to release this information to you? Because this is HIPAA law stuff. And unless you can show me a written document that says it's okay for you to talk to me about her medical condition, they will shut you right off right there. And they should. Because you can get in big trouble with the medical stuff now. So the idea is, we're there to support, we're there to minister, we're there to help. Don't get out of your field of expertise. You're there to minister spiritually and emotionally and be a support, bring good news, help them. But, don't get out of your field. Anything else? All right. The last part there we're not going to go through. It's just information for you. I put it in there because it absolutely shows the vitalness of a team and of you being involved. Because as churches grow, you can outgrow your ability to minister to people effectively if you're trying to do everything yourself. And the thing is, people come on Sundays because they want to be a part of, or they come during the week because they want to be a part of what's happening here, so you grow. But with that, they come with an expectation of, but Pastor, I've been coming there for 6 months and now I'm sick. And you never even showed up at the hospital and I was there for a week. Well, if you've got 200-300 people, guess what? You may not make it. but somebody should be there. And that's part of building the team, because as a church, if we will teach people correctly, I am not their answer. You are not their answer. Jesus is. And you can show up and pray the prayer of faith as well as anybody else can. I had one minister, this was in a minister's conference he was sharing. He had reached about 1,500 people. It wasn't done growing yet. They grew past that. But he said, we got up to about 1,500 people, and he said, I got up and I started making this announcement every so often. If you see me at the hospital, it's because you're dying. Other than that, I won't be able to make it. We've got other ministers on staff. We have care teams that we will send. He said, if you see me walk through the door, you need to understand I've been told you're dying. That's why I'm there. He said, I can't do it. I can't do it. There's just way too many responsibilities and obligations, and he said, I can't do it. So they had their hospital team, they had their care team, but in the ministers' conference, he said this. He said, but people still were complaining, but I want my pastor. He said, well, that's nice. But like it says in here, pastors literally kill themselves trying to run so fast to keep people happy. And his point was this. Some people need to mature to the point they realize it's not the pastor who's going to heal them. It's Jesus. And there might be an 8-year-old child who comes in and lays hands on them, and they get up and walk out of that bed. Put your faith in Jesus and the agreement of faith with someone. So sometimes we have to, as we continue growing here, we're going to have to instruct people. Like I said already, it can be hard. Sometimes I can make the visit very quickly. Sometimes I can't. That's where it's just best we don't let anybody drop through the cracks, and we have a team. So that last article really addresses it from a different angle of this is why you are so important. So it's just kind of information for you. So unless there's a question, I think we're done. Any other questions? All right, so what we will do then is take this, digest it, see what you think of it. If you're interested in trying this or getting in the loop and so forth, Vicki is the lady you speak to.